Next is a question from Vinnie. And while Vinnie is not technically on the Patreon supporter list, he is a guy that reached out to me personally because he wanted to support, but he didn't have like a credit card, so he couldn't, sign up directly. But, he supported directly to me. So, and Vinnie is an old friend from Belgium, so I gotta give a big shout out to him. He's a really stand-up guy and one of the nicest guys, one of the most interesting guys I've met through this whole breaking journey. So, thank you, Vinnie, for that. Vinnie asks, do you think that a beginner is more free than someone who's been dancing for 20 years? And I think this is a really good question and something that maybe people don't think about a lot. I've kind of touched on this before, but actually this is a little shout out to Jameson, another Patreon supporter. Jameson told me about this book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and I have a video about that, about Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and it's basically about this, that when you're a beginner, you might not be technically as good or as skilled as someone who's been dancing for 20 years, but as far as like creativity and openness to ideas and things like that, you are way more creative, way more free, because you have no conception of what this thing is and there's no constraints. So in that sense, like you're way more free. But like too much freedom, too much chaos, it can be a bad thing, and like you're just doing whatever, and like there's no structure to anything and it doesn't look like anything, right? And so it's kind of like, it's always about finding that balance. So as you get more experience, you get more and more structured, and you start to understand, okay, well, I can still be free, but within these sort of boundaries, and what can I create? But one of the problems that can happen if you don't routinely like add a bit of chaos to this order, this creeping order, is you can get too narrow-minded, too focused on like what the way you dance or how it was when you started, and you're not open to these new ideas that are being developed as the world goes on, and new things get created, and new music comes up, and new influences and new pairings of things get mashed together, and so new ideas come up. But if you're not able to kind of reopen your mind again, the way that you look at things, then you're going to be so focused on this, right? And this is the way that breaking should be, this is how it's supposed to be, and if you do anything that's not like this, it's not breaking. And to an extent that's kind of true, and like eventually things branch off, but there's a definite period where it's like, well, where you got to define that limit, and that's a whole other little separate thing. But yeah, for sure beginners are way more free, and I think if you can always keep that idea in your head of the beginner's mind, and always remember that try to stay open to new ideas, stay open to new things. And this is a big thing, that like you got to be careful of whose advice you take or how you take it, and always remember that take advice with a grain of salt, that like that's their opinion and their perspective from the experiences that they have, and it might be very useful, but at the same time you always got to be a little critical of things, and your experience is completely different than theirs, or possibly, and you're probably living in coming up in a different generation or whatever, so you always got to keep that in mind, and routinely kind of like open things up and look around, or just be open to new ideas in that sense. Not about looking around necessarily, but just be open to ideas, but also have some sense of what you're doing. So it's that balance between like chaos and order, freedom and structure, and that kind of thing, which is, you just kind of do that, get that over time. And like, I've been dancing for almost maybe 20 years. It's like 18 or 19 years or something like that. And I only this idea only really clicked in my head in the last like few years, 3-4 years, where I really feel like I understood freestyle and what that meant and letting go and this kind of stuff. But I understood it as this balance between freedom and structure, and understanding strong foundations, or strong understanding of your foundation, your sets and your movement, but also being able to let that go, and when things don't go according to plan, be able to shift and adjust and this kind of stuff. So yeah, really good question.